Hello, and welcome to Embodying Mystical Mac. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining. If you are returning, thank you so much for returning. Today we have an episode that was meant to be way back in October, but life happened and it just never made it out. But it is one of those that I would still love to talk about. So without further ado, let's get into it, right? What is this thing that when fall comes around, when Halloween comes around, we start to hear this idea of the thinning veil and the season of the witch, and what does it all really mean? Where does it all necessarily come from? Now, just to disclaim, my notions and explanations and knowledge around this has a lot more to do with what I've personally observed, read, have intuitively put together, and innately known in the very mystical, very difficult to explain sort of way. And again, this is a disclaimer. These are all my own explanations, my own opinions. If you disagree, have different opinions, like that's awesome. Share them down below. Just please do so kindly. And if not, some of this stuff doesn't really vibe with you, awesome. No worries. You can discard it, right? Like just like my tarot readings, take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and let's treat each other like we want to be treated, right? So without further ado, let's get into it, okay? So this idea of the thinning veil, before I can really talk about what that metaphorical phrase means, I put metaphor in quotes because as metaphorical as it is, it's actually a very, very good way to describe that. So while it's a metaphor, I would imagine that when my psychic sight becomes a little bit more heightened, and I don't mean my psychic sight internally, my psychic sight externally with my physical eyes, I would imagine that energy tends to look like coating at times, right? Like people's auras, kind of like this coating of energy around them. So it's a really good phrase to describe that. But first I have to bring up something that I love to bring up when I talk about energy, when I talk about these topics that used to be I say used to be like they aren't still. In a lot of places they still are very woo-woo and out there. But it's becoming more and more commonplace that we understand that there are energies outside of ourselves, some of which we just simply can't see nor explain. And what I love to bring up in such discussions and in such matters is the electromagnetic spectrum, which is this spectrum of energy, right? Where you have everything from the visible light spectrum, which is a teeny tiny percentage of the entire electromagnetic spectrum, meaning our physical human eyes can only perceive a teeny tiny bit of what's actually out there. So it's got the visible light spectrum, it's got radio waves, it's got gamma radiation, right? It's got everything under the sun that any of our scientific tools have detected that is some sort of energy floating out there. And when you think about the fact that the visible light spectrum is such a small part of this huge list, right? A spectrum is not necessarily a list, but if we were to take the spectrum part out of it and just list out all the energies that surround us at all times, I mean, shoot, like Wi-Fi, being surrounded by Wi-Fi, you're surrounded by radiation, okay? So, and therefore energy. So, like, if we were to list all of those things, like, the amount that we can actually perceive with our human eyes is so limited. that even science is alluding to the fact that simply because you can't see something doesn't mean it's not there. And now when we think of psychics and things like that, the first thing we usually, or at least I should say, I usually think about in like with sight and things is like ghosts, right? And spirits and things like that. But there are also all kinds of beings out there. There are elementals, meaning fairies, right? Nymphs, like all of these things that we have honestly thought to be legend for a really long time. It's not that they're not real completely, because the thing about the human brain is this. For the person who told the first story of the first nymph or fairy that they saw or whatever, whether they told it or they wrote it, because of how the human brain works, they couldn't have not seen something that looked like it. It's kind of an interesting phenomenon that our brains really don't come up with anything original. They just create amalgamations of things that we've seen and perceived before. Which is why it's so interesting. Dolores Cannon, she's a really awesome hypnotherapist. She's passed now, but she was able to uncover some incredible information. I would definitely check those books out, especially if you're interested in like ETs and stuff like that. But basically, a lot of accounts that she found through her clients, patients, that encountered ETs and had like really awesome, profound experiences. The ETs that came through and spoke through them a lot of the time described how at times it was difficult to describe something because our human brain had never perceived of anything like it before, and therefore describing it becomes really, really difficult. Because how can you describe something to somebody if they've never truly experienced it at all? The only way is to pull from things they have. In fact, and this is a little side tangent that will make its way back, one of my friends from college, she has this thing where, and this was before COVID, so don't even come for me, but she has this thing where she's never really been able to smell or taste. And I remember one day I went on a crusade to a crusade, that's not the right word. I went on a mission to describe how things smell and taste to her. Mostly smell, because she loved flowers and stuff like that. And the best way to describe those things was to pull from stuff she knew. So how does a rose smell? To me, it smelled like romantic sweetness, but then even sweet is wrong because sweet is a taste, right? Oftentimes, and she can't taste. So, it became difficult, but then when I realized okay, if I can pull from things she knows, right? So then describing her man doing something really lovely for her, and that's how that feels. And then, okay, turn that into a scent. In fact, I think I just did it better now than I did it back then. So my bad, Brittany. If you're watching this, I've evolved. If you want to give me a call. But regardless, it's really difficult to pull from things that we have never experienced at all before, or to just formulate things in our heads that we have never seen or experienced before. Even when we have things being described in books and things that we have never perceived of before, the way that they're being described, it's the person who's writing them obviously has, right? They've seen that thing, so they can clearly describe it to us. So this idea of all of these mythical creatures that we think are not real, it's not that they're not real entirely in the fact that they're just not physical. So just like there's a huge electromagnetic spectrum of energy that quite literally is ever present and surrounds us all the time, these beings exist in these energy fields, i.e. dimensions, all the time. So when we take that principle, when we take this idea, and I get it, for some of you that are not very mystical at all, this is, maybe this information is like really crazy to you or really new to you, like, suspend your disbelief, or, if it's really triggering, please click off this video. It is not worth it. But really, like, just suspend your disbelief if you choose to stay, and really entertain this idea. There's a huge, and you can look this up, it is scientific. There's an electromagnetic spectrum of energy that surrounds us at all times. Entirely most of which, that's contradictory, surprisingly, most of which, we cannot see with our naked eye. And then add the fact that we have so many people in our society that can perceive things such as spirits or elementals or other people's auras or whatever. And when I say perceive, I just now meant see with their physical eyes, but I'm gonna go deeper than that, because I myself, though my physical eyes, I believe, were shut down, my psychic eyes through my physical eyes were shut down a long, long time ago. For what I imagine, like, my protection, life was hard enough being hypersensitive energetically. I didn't need to see all the things that I was feeling, so to speak. But I have always been, like, I've always had a really strong sense of feeling, like my clairsentience. Look that up if you don't know what that means. My clairsentience has always been very, very, very strong. And I would even dare to say that my clairvoyance has always been really, really, really strong. It's all in the mind's eye, for the most part, with rare exceptions in my life. And I mean, really, like, all the clairs have always kind of been a thing for me. And I know many people that, whether it's one or all of them or few, that this is very true for them. And by the way, again, if you don't know what clairaudience means, clairvoyance is a more common one that we've heard. Clairsentience, you can look all this stuff up, but I'll give you, I guess, the brief version, because I just mentioned this again. It's just when it's clairsentience, it's basically, instead of perceiving with your physical eyes, you feel energy a lot. You're really sensitive to energy because your feeling body picks up on it. So a really good example is being able to walk into a room and kind of sensing the room. A really, really, really obvious example that quite literally everyone has experienced is either when you walk into, like, a really lively event or a really not lively event, be it like really sad, like a funeral, or just like a party that nobody likes each other, nobody's having a good time, like, versus, a party where everyone loves each other and everybody's having a good time, or in the very least everybody's cordial and everybody's having a sweet time. It's a very stark difference between those two scenarios and how you walk into those scenarios feeling, right? One, you're like, okay, oh, people are chill, people are having fun, I think I can have a good time here, right? The other one, you're like, oh. And if you're someone who literally cannot relate to this example, I don't know what to do for you. This is the most obvious version that I can think of this. But clairsentience would essentially be that idea that, like, okay, you're not seeing the, like, for lack of a better term, like, shitty vibes come off of everybody because they don't want to be there, or like the really awesome vibrant vibes coming off of everybody because they do, but you feel them. Okay? Clairaudience is a little bit harder to describe and easier at the same time. It's harder if you can't really conceive of it because you've never experienced it or know anybody who has, going back to that point again. But it's basically when, instead of like really deep feeling, really deep seeing, it's a sound thing. Like a lot of, one of my friends actually, she says it, she was like, I heard them say this, and when she says them, it's her spirit guides and angels, those kinds of things, that force, the forces that are co-creating with her specifically, that chose to. And she'll, like, for example, one time she bought me this awesome book that I'm almost done with, and can't believe I'm not done with it yet. I mean, I can because ADHD, but still. And she bought an extra, basically. And she didn't know why she was buying the extra at the time, but she just heard in her mind, like, hey, just get an extra one. And a lot of people actually might relate to this more than you think. Like that little, we call it that little voice, quote, quote, that little voice, right? I talk about it. Your intuition, it doesn't yell, it whispers. And yeah, I'm being metaphorical for sure, because intuition, especially for those people that are primarily clairsentient, it's a big thing that they feel. It's a gut feeling, right? And you might be someone like me who like has clairsentience for a lot of things. Like I'm definitely that girl who like walks into a room, knows exactly what it feels like, can really pick up on people's energies and things like that. But when it comes to like gut feelings and stuff like that, it's definitely more of a clairaudient thing for me. It's definitely more of a, hey, take that thing that you didn't plan on taking today. Put it in your purse. You don't know why right now. And every single time I've ignored that little voice, I regret it. It has never really been like a deep, deep, deep soul-crushing regret. But I imagine that if I continue to ignore it, continue. Oh, echo. Stop. She's reminding me to start doing my bedtime routine, which, thanks. Appreciate you. I'm always recording when Echo is reminding me of shit. Oh my god. Anyway, I will get it back. Where was I? Okay, I imagine if I continuously ignored those little intuitive things, that my intuition would eventually have to... The universe always ramps it up, okay? When you're not doing the things that you're supposed to be doing to like progress your journey forward towards your life path and your purpose for being here, and mind you, this does not have to be anything grand by any means. It just has to be what's right for you. And when you're following that path, it's not necessarily that nothing ever goes wrong, but it's like things like your health, right? Things like your foundational relationships, things like your home life and things like that. Like, they're not always on shaky ground. I'm not saying life doesn't happen. I'm not saying challenges don't come. They do. But it's one of those things where it's like instability isn't the MO. When instability is the MO, then there are definitely changes that are probably needing to be made. And I can't speak to any specific examples because this is just the pattern that I've observed in my own life and in other people's lives that I know, that the more and more we put off these like really big things that need to occur for us to just go to that next step in our journey on this life, the universe has a really interesting way of hitting us over the head with it when we don't listen. But regardless, right, that idea of listening, that inner voice, that's very much clairaudience. And then you have clairvoyance, which is like you're very, very, like you're always hearing this word in paranormal thrillers or whatever, when there is, a seer or a psychic of some sort. It's like, oh, they're clairvoyant. And that really, like, yeah, it can totally mean your physical sight, like you physically see energy and things of the sort. But it can also be that you perceive stuff in your mind's eye really, really clearly. That's always kind of what it's meant for me. However, there are ways to train your physical sight. There are ways to train all of your psychic abilities, and we all have them, all right? Regardless of how attuned we are or not, we all have them. And so those are like just a few of the clairs. I think there's like one or two more, but I'm not going to touch on them right now. But regardless, let's go back to our original point, or rather, I mean, look, we're going on a journey and it's all working out pretty well. So considering the fact that we have this whole electromagnetic spectrum, that most of which we can't see, and then considering the other fact that we have so many people on this planet, not just right now, but we have a literal history, all right? There's so many interesting YouTube videos, by the way, about stuff like this, in my opinion. I love stuff like that, of like the history of psychics in our human history or whatever it is. But things like that, doesn't have to be psychics, but just in general, these things that, just to see how far back certain things have gone. And there has always been like a village wise woman or wise man, right? Like in Pocahontas, for some reason, I just thought of the movie. And Native communities, Native American communities, any community that's like deeply, deeply related to the earth and connected to nature has more often than not had some sort of shaman-like priestess situation, person. Wow. That serves as that sort of mystical guide and wisdom for their village, for their community, right? In Pocahontas, it's that wise man in the village. And I remember, right, in the tent with the fire, and they were showing the soldiers and the guns and all that stuff. And so considering the fact that we have a traceable history of people that, I'm not going to say claim, because that would literally be insulting my own life experience, because, wow, I did not expect to get emotional in this one. There's still lifetimes worth of anger inside me about the fact that people like me have been killed and tortured and hurt, at worst, and at the least been ridiculed, cast aside, gaslit, neglected, ostracized. For speaking about shit we couldn't even control at first. Some of which a lot of us can't even control now. Hold on, I need a tissue. Do not mistake these tears for tears of anything other than pure rage and anger. There's no fucking sadness in me about this at this point right now. Not that there isn't ever. It is really saddening that humans can be this cruel and this retaliatory when people aren't even like instigating anything against them. They're just like trying to live their best life. Meanwhile, they're like perceiving Aunt Mary, who's been dead for 20 years. Imagine living that experience, and then you go and you tell your mom, and your mom goes, "Oh my God, my child's possessed," and now the whole village comes down on you and you're on fire. All the while, you were scared out of your fucking mind because, who wouldn't be in that circumstance? Now, of course, when you think about like ancient communities and intelligent, I'm not going to say intelligent like it's a blanket statement, emotionally, spiritually intelligent communities, that is not the case at all. They would be taken to the village wise woman, to the village wise man, wise men, wise women, wise people, council. And those people or person that is also, quote, gifted, quote, and I use that because My rage is not just that humans were so cruel. It's the fact that it's like sleep training a baby. If you do not have the awareness and the knowledge about child development to know that that baby needs your comfort because they are not developmentally able to provide it for themselves. Meaning, it's like asking a fish to walk. It doesn't have legs. It never will have legs. It can't breathe out of water. It can't even walk in water because it doesn't have legs. A baby does not have a self-soothing mechanism. So when you sleep train that baby, you are torturing that baby. You are also sending, wow, this video went way down a rabbit hole. We'll wrap around to it. I'm certain of it, but I'm getting so heated right now. Okay. A baby does not have the capabilities to self-soothe. And this is scientifically proven. You can go look it up. I've literally studied psychology, especially child development. When you do not soothe a baby when they're crying, you project this idea to them that the world cannot be trusted. And you have no idea the deep fuckery that creates in a developing human. When you persecute a person, be it at the most extreme level, at the medium level, at the least, for simply being who they are, because most people that identify as empaths will not tell you that they chose that. Most of them, in fact, I myself was one that felt like I was enslaved to this thing that was supposed to be like this ability. But instead, what it did to me is when I was around people that were draining, I would come away like energetically shot and dead. When I was around anybody, basically, I couldn't help but just bring some of that energy home with me. It took self-work. It took reading books about it. It took learning and untangling childhood trauma. And really and I'm not saying I've honed in my spiritual psychic gifts in any way, shape, or form to the degree that I even consider honed, but I've definitely gotten to this point where I am a responsible empath. And what that means is that I no longer take other people's energy home with me. I'm very aware to keep my energy field wide enough that I'm not absorbing people and places and things. And when I feel weighted down, I clear that energy right away. But that, again, I'm going to reiterate, took self-work, took time, it took effort. And it took, unfortunately, growing up in a society where nobody teaches you this shit. In fact, what they do teach you is that if you feel any of this shit, oh, you're one of those, aren't you? A little crazy. A little this, a little that. Add your word here. I've heard them all. When we persecute people for just being, it's what we do to the LGBTQIA plus community, right? Persecute them for just being. And I'm not going to say we because I don't. That is not, no. Fuck the fuck no. But that is what some of us humans do, isn't it? The ones that don't understand that being gay, being bi, being whatever, it's not a choice. Being extra sensitive is not a choice. Now, to close this entire video, what does the thinning veil mean? All that it means, this little saying of thinning veil, the veil is thinning, yeah, I think I've just repeated it enough. when we subscribe to this idea that there's a whole wide array of energies out there and there are people that feel them, and then we start to explore this world a little bit more, we start to see why things like astrology and other things that were considered to be, you know, just as crazy and woo-woo as those people that we're talking about here, they actually are based in something. They hold a place in this like mystical, spiritual well of knowledge. And astrology, though, in my opinion, gets taken way too far nowadays by, you know, some people who don't understand the depth of it, don't understand it really, what it's for, like how it is. Man, it's so silly. They just blame their bad personality traits or their, you know, crappy coping mechanisms on their signs, and that is not it at all. But regardless, like astrology, when you look at it critically, and when you look at it from the lens of like the planets are, you know, always moving, the stars are always shifting and changing and whatever, and that information, it is information, and it gets communicated to the earth, to us on the earth. And while the seasons are changing, that also means that the energy around us is changing. And the thing that happens in the months of October, like late September through November, is this shifting of energy creates more space for the dimensions to blur. And that's this idea of the thinning veil. So whereas before, picture like there may be opaque walls in between each dimension, around this time of the year, these walls become transparent. And some of them even less physical. And it makes it, you know, more, it gives this sort of charged feeling to the air. Charged in the way of like, because these walls are now transparent and even some doors have shown up, right, between certain dimensions. It's almost like an anything could happen energetically kind of energy. And that's what this saying of thinning the veil, like, or thinning the veil, of the veil thinning really means. It's just this idea that like the energy is a little bit more, it's not out of alignment, but rather it's realigning. The energy is realigning. And in this realigning, there's just space and room for these dimensions to blur. So what is normally a very thick veil becomes very thin. Yeah, I did not expect this video to go where it went, or this podcast episode, if that's where you are. Thank you if you're listening, by the way. These videos that don't have any real visual need for them do go up on the podcast right away, basically the night that they get set up. Wow, I can't speak. The night they get edited, they go up right away. And then the YouTube gets it at the next best time the next day. So yeah, anyhow, if you've made it here now and you've been here before, it is time for our tarot card that I love to pull every single time. And today I love to introduce the Witch's Tarot. Oh my God, I'm so excited about this. It was one of my gifts for 3 years with my man. I'm very excited. We have this little tradition. And in addition to the thing that he normally gets me, he gets me different versions of it. He got me this deck as well. So we're going to use it. It's really badass. It's really beautiful. And I've actually been eyeing it for a few years, which is crazy. Crazy. I've seen it like in a few shops and I've never grabbed it because it's just always been like, I've always just made excuses, basically. Like, I'm like, no, it's like, it's more expensive. Like, it is one of the more expensive ones. Yeah, it's like, I love him. It was like ingrained into me that you never leave the price on gifts. And how did I know he wasn't going to blur this out? Because who cares, honestly, but legit. Oh, they have an Instagram page. That's exciting. Yeah, no, it's like a $30 deck. So I haven't really spent any more than like 20 on a deck. And as much as this deck is 100% worth it, every time I've walked by it, it's been there. I haven't done it. And this was the best gift. So we're going to use it. If you would like information about a personal tarot reading, I will be doing that right after we do this. So let's go ahead and pull a card. What is it that we need for today? And my practice is to always invoke the intention of being a clear channel for divine guidance and to be conducting this reading for the highest vibrations of all involved. Okay. We've got, oh wow, that's so beautiful. These cards are gorgeous, man. We've got the Queen of Swords. Wow, that's bizarre because I'm pretty sure the Viscount Who Loved Me video, we got the Queen of Swords, but it was a different deck. Okay. So since this is a new deck to me, even the old decks to me, I love to look at this as well. But I just appreciate looking at what the companion has to say about the card. Oh, look at that. I pulled her up right away. Okay. This one's a little long, so give me just a second to skim. Okay, cool. Yeah. So I really love this deck. It has like really detailed meanings for their cards, which I just love that. I really do. I love it when they personalize the deck to a degree, but it's still open enough that you're like, oh no, for sure. This is the Queen of Swords as a whole. So the Queen of Swords, before I get into what they're saying, I'm just going to touch a little bit on, first of all, what it looks like if you are watching on the podcast. Here, I'm like trying to make it focus on the video, but it's really not wanting to. Okay, well, we try. Could I do it like this? No, okay. The Queen of Swords. So we were talking about fairies. How interesting, because there's a little fairy right here. So the Queen of Swords, she's kind of got this throne that is what looks to be literally sitting at the edge of a cliff, but somehow, like, you just know it's not going to topple over. She has this, like, awesome blue, sort of aquamarine, cross between aquamarine and sapphire blue cloak. And she's got this sword that she's holding upright. I believe she has it's either lavender or hyacinths. And she has also got, I think they're bellflowers, white bellflowers. I don't know if they're called bellflowers, but that's what they look like. She's also got what looks like two birds. I don't know what kind of birds they are. They might be blue jays. One on the ground and one on her throne. And she's looking forward. There's wind. One of her hands is out as if kind of feeling the wind. She's got a little fairy by her feet somehow. I don't know what the fairy is doing though. And there are a little bit of clouds in the sky, but for the most part, the sky is pretty blue. And the Queen of Swords, she's really, really strong. I mean, while by virtue of being feminine dominant, all of the female court cards are going to have an air of water, because water is a very feminine element, and the feminine is often related to water in its energy, the way that it flows. However, the Queen of Swords, by virtue of being the Queen of Swords, she is an air signed card, right? She is her dominant element is air, which means that she's very logical. She's very sharp-witted. She's very, her communication is really great, right? Air signs, they tend to be really great communicators. And the Queen of Swords, while this card can represent a person that's like this, it can also just represent the fact that you're in a position right now where you have wisdom, you have intuition, you have independence. If you want to be, you can be very assertive. Whatever situation came to mind when you started listening to this, you have what it takes to do the thing you need to do, but you have to walk your talk. You have to walk the talk. You can't just talk, right? And you can't just walk either, because if you're just walking aimlessly, what the heck are you doing? And that is not the Queen of Swords energy. In fact, she would rather sit still in her throne until the right moment to act than just walk around aimlessly, right? And when it comes to the time and the moment where she's going to act, where she needs to act, she will, because she walks her talk. So this is a situation where you've got what it takes. And especially if you're questioning intelligence, if you're questioning wisdom, if you're questioning your mental growth and your mental journey in any way, shape, or form, this is the sign that you really shouldn't in this situation. You've got everything that you need, and you just need to put one foot in front of the other and see the things that you need to see through. Okay? Pretty short, but I will read to you what the companion book suggests. Assert your independence, stand up for yourself, follow your intuition, and maybe try something new. There you go. So if that piques your interest at all and you'd like to do a personal reading, you can go ahead and go to calendly.com/mysticalmac. Click the tarot reading option, and right there you'll see a few options to book during the week. Right now I'm doing the readings by Zoom. They're about 30 minutes, and I'm doing them by donation. So check that out. And of course, especially if you've gotten all this way, please please subscribe, please leave a comment if you're so inclined, and maybe even check out some of my other videos. You might like them. And thank you so much for being here. I really, really, really do appreciate that. And yeah, I definitely didn't expect to shoot this today. I was actually going to shoot my very, very late video with a deer. Because it just still hasn't happened. I feel like every year around Halloween, this is the time where we start getting really behind on like 1 or 2 episodes. So I will be very happy to shoot with him very soon. And for now, stay mystical, stay grounded, and I will catch you next time.